Hi everyone, and thanks for being here. I'm Peter Wittig, co-founder at Motive.io. We're based in Vancouver, Canada, and we make an immersive training platform for enterprise. Today, I'm going to discuss how to scale VR by giving training professionals control of the content. First, here are a few key points about this talk. Who is it for? Anyone who is using VR for training or is looking into it. Particularly, it's for those who are training professionals, instructional designers, L&D people, and decision makers. VR is great for training. Many universities and large companies have shown this to be the case. I'm not going to go through that in this talk. You can find plenty of that information on the web. There's also a guide on our company website. There are many factors involved in scaling VR. We'll focus on one today. Training professionals need direct control of the content creation, updates, and distribution wherever possible. This will drive process improvements that will make scaling a realistic proposition. This talk is applicable to a wide range of industries and training types. There are companies in all of these industries that use VR training. These are a few examples, but there are certainly more. Here's what we'll cover: creating, updating, and distributing non-VR training content. This is how it's done today in many companies. Why that process works. It scales, and that's why it's used in organizations all over the world. Let's learn from it. Creating, updating, and distributing VR training content. How are companies doing this today? Issues that hinder scaling in those processes. Process solutions to help you scale VR in your organization. Training professionals have a lot of tools today. A few are listed here: Captivate, Storyline, PowerPoint. There are many. They have the skill set to use them and a way to get that content to trainees. That is very important. Let's look at that process in more detail. This is how training content gets produced, more or less, in many organizations. A training professional creates content using a tool. They iterate on it until they are happy with it. When they're ready, they present it in a classroom, make it available via an LMS or some other company system. The training professional has direct control over the creation, updating, and distribution of the content. Why? Because they can use the tools. Let's keep that in mind. Enter VR training. Increased retention and engagement, increased confidence, more focused trainees, faster training times. People will be better prepared to do their jobs with less training. This means a happier, safer, more productive workforce. Everybody wants that. I want to address a couple issues about VR training that I hear often. Will VR replace some forms of training? Yes, I believe it will. Will it replace all other kinds of training? No, absolutely not. VR training is an effective way to help people do their jobs better. It is a positive addition to the training space and one we should all be excited about. Now, while these are all important, keep actionable data in mind. We're going to talk about that later. Earlier, we noticed that training professionals have direct control over the creation, updating, and distribution of non-VR training content. With VR, that shifts to the developers. The training professionals still have all the knowledge of what the training should be. Now they need to convey that to the developers and verify their work. Let's look at a common process for creating and updating VR training content. No tools for training professionals, content creation process. Here's how it works. Trainers create a series of documents, spreadsheets, videos, emails, meeting notes to document the training procedure or any updates to the procedure. They give that to the developers. The developers code and create that content in Unity or Unreal. While that's happening, the trainers wait. The developers create a version of the VR app and deploy that on VR headsets. The trainers run through the procedures in VR and make note of any changes or updates that are necessary. If there are no changes required, you're done. If changes are needed, go through another cycle. While they're doing that, The developers wait. Each cycle takes a few weeks. That time will get shorter as you go through more cycles. This process requires several cycles before resulting in your VR app. Now, there are several scaling issues with this. More people are involved in this process. Half your team is waiting on the other half. Knowledge transfer can be error-prone. Trainers are on the outside of this process. They do not have direct control over the content. To be clear, you can definitely create quality content this way. However, the process makes scaling more difficult. This is slow and expensive. It is also currently the most popular process for making VR training content. Luckily, it is not the only way. Why is this process used? This is a good process when there are no tools available for training professionals. Maybe there weren't any tools when you started. Perhaps you didn't know there were tools available. This can certainly happen when a technology is new. VR providers need to do a better job of letting industry know what is available. Perhaps tools existed, but they didn't do what you needed them to. Maybe the tools didn't match the skill set of your team. Now, there are several options for tools available on the market. Tools are a better way. Before we look at the options, let's make sure we're all on the same page. I don't believe I need to convince you that this is a good idea and that this is the direction we're heading. I think you already know. But for those of you who aren't convinced, I'll briefly explain why I think this is the way forward. This follows a well-established pattern for new technology. Whenever a new technology arrives, developers are the gatekeepers. When the content creators get tools, use of the technology explodes. This was true for website creation, video on the web, and many other examples. The cost of creation goes down and the use goes up. We have every reason to think that by giving tools to training professionals to control VR content, this will follow the same pattern. This is what the market tells us. I know that some companies who use a no-tools approach are being asked by their customers for tools to control content. I see that as evidence that the current market is validating the pattern we just discussed. I hope we're all on board with tools at this point. So what are the available options? No tools. We've talked about this a lot. Slow, expensive, and currently the most popular choice. Training professionals do not have direct control over the creation, updating, or distribution of VR training content. That makes it hard to scale. Coming soon. I mentioned that some VR companies that use the no-tools approach are building tools. This is a good sign. It indicates that tools are the direction we're all heading. As the name implies, these tools are not currently available. When the betas or first versions arrive, my guess is that they will fall into one of the next few categories as opposed to being something fundamentally new. With these, provided they can do what you need when they arrive, you'll need to wait to scale. One size fits all. These solutions provide tools that can be easy to use. However, their ease of use can limit their configurability. From what I've seen, they are more similar to 3D classrooms than a replication of the real work environment in which a trainee virtually performs the tasks for which they need to be trained. If you don't need a custom scene that matches your work environment, this could be an option for you. In-editor tools. These are powerful. These are plugins, UIs, and other features that have been added inside Unity or Unreal. Their aim is to make developer tools more accessible to training professionals. Your training team will need Unity or Unreal skills and developer support to get the most out of these tools. Web authoring. This gives training professionals a web-based drag-and-drop authoring tool to create, update, and distribute training modules that happen in a custom VR scene. A developer is needed to build the scene, but from that point, the training professional can create as many scenarios using it as they'd like. I'm going to focus on this option, so let's take a deeper look. There are 3 reasons I will focus on web authoring. 1, it provides a way for training professionals to have direct control of the content. 2, they don't need Unity or Unreal skills. 3, it works with a custom VR scene which matches your real-world work environment. Web authoring creation process. This process provides a tool for each job role. It lets both training professionals and developers work in parallel. This is far more efficient than half your team waiting on the other half, as described in the no tools approach. Developers can create and update the VR training app in Unity and deploy it to VR headsets. Training professionals can use a drag and drop web editor to create and update training procedures. At any point, either group can put on a VR headset to try the latest version of the VR training app. The VR training app knows how to automatically download and make available any procedures made in the web authoring tool. This means content changes can be done by training professionals. This gives training professionals direct control of the content. I'm going to talk about updates and distribution in a second. First, an analogy. Think of a theater where a play would be put on. There's a stage, lights, sounds, props, and an actor. The play has a script. It says when the lights and the sounds are used, where the props are, and when and how the actor uses the props. Now imagine all those props are bolted to the stage. The lights are on a complicated timer. The sound comes from a pre-built music box. Then, a script update comes through. You need to call in the construction crew to unbolt and rebolt the props, reprogram the light timers, and rebuild the music box. This sounds slow, expensive, and cumbersome, right? That's a no-tools approach to theater. The same is true in VR. Now think of how a theater should work. Script updates come through. Actors may give feedback, which the writer can incorporate into the script. Light and sound can be easily changed. This is a tools approach. The actors are the trainees. The training professional is the writer-director. The developers are the construction crews. Keeping this analogy in mind, let's look at the update and distribution process for no tools versus tools. At this point, you're using a no tools process, and your VR app has been deployed to headsets in the field. An update needs to go out. Here's how it's done. The training professional requests a change. The developer creates the build and deploys it to a test headset. This process gets repeated until a build has been approved. It is uploaded to an MDM solution and distributed to headsets in the field. A developer is required for every change that you want to deploy. I know of an instance where this approach is used. Updates to content are done twice a year. Imagine if trainees could get those changes later that week or later that day. How much revenue is lost due to months of waiting for improved training content? You don't have to do it that way. The key here is the need for a new build. If you can remove the need for a new build, you no longer need a developer. If you're using a no tools approach or your editor is inside Unity or Unreal, this is the process that is required. Web authoring improves on this. Again, the situation is your VR app has been deployed to headsets in the field. An update needs to go out. Here's how it's done with a web authoring process. The training professional decides, not requests, decides to make a change. They use the web authoring tool to make the change and makes any adjustments. They distribute that change via the authoring tool. No developer required. The updating and distribution is directly controlled by the training professional. If you'll remember, this diagram looks a lot like the first diagram of the non-VR content model. This scales. Many people ask, do I ever need to create a new build? Yes, sometimes. Sometimes is the key. Often you don't. The choice becomes, do you want to have to create a new build some of the time, or 100% of the time, as you would with any other process that uses a custom VR scene? This is a huge time and cost saver. This is an example of a project we are working on with Accenture, the University of British Columbia, and BC Women's Hospital. On average, it takes 29 steps to safely don and doff PPE equipment. Due to short supply, the equipment available can change. That can impact the procedure. Different hospitals have different suppliers. Different suppliers can mean different combinations of procedures. Imagine needing to code for every combination. Imagine you needed to change that procedure by next week. If you need to create a new build and go through a developer, it quickly becomes infeasible. Web authoring lets you do this. Another place this is useful is soft skills training. Imagine a scene in an office with a desk, a chair, and a few options for avatars. An avatar can recognize the voice of the user using speech recognition. How many different branching conversations could you author? Employee onboarding, de-escalation scenarios, sales training, difficult conversations, common customer interactions. How many variations on each of those types of training could you produce? Imagine needing a developer not only for each new type of training, but for every single change in any given type of training. It doesn't have to be done that way. Once you have the scene, you can do it yourself with web authoring. I could give more examples in manufacturing, procedural, safety training, and others. Know that this process approach is applicable to many other types of training, as well as the ones that I've shown. Earlier on, I mentioned actionable data. In this case, I mean the training professional can act on it. So this should look familiar. Training content can also be uploaded to an LMS. Again, the training professional still controls the distribution here. No new build. The headsets send data back to the LRS. This allows for continuous improvement on training. This is a big deal. Continuous improvement. A trainer authors content and distributes it. Trainees go through the content. Data about the training sessions is available via the LRS. The trainer reviews the data and identifies areas of improvement. The cycle starts again. Using the data, a training professional can know what training needs to be improved. For example, they might see that most trainees are getting stuck on step 7 of a 10-step process. Web authoring allows them to add step 7.5 and watch to see if this improves the learning outcomes. This can be done generally or even on a per-user basis. It is also possible to author a focused training on a particular step, a detailed breakdown of exactly what needs to happen, and let users start at that point. This lets them get the retraining they need on demand without going through the whole process. No developer required. Costs are kept down, content is produced faster, and training improves. This is only possible with VR training when the training professional has direct control. This will go a long way to helping you scale your VR training program in your organization. I urge you to be deliberate in your choice of process and your choice of tools. Know why you are making those choices. In summary, scaling VR training means a better trained, more efficient, and safer workforce. Everybody wants that. Process improvements in the creation, updating, and distribution of VR content will help you scale VR. These improvements can be achieved by giving direct control of the content to training professionals wherever possible. It won't always be 100% of the time, but give them control wherever possible. Control of the content depends on training professionals having tools they can use. This will reduce the involvement of developers. That will reduce the time and cost of content changes. Thank you for attending my talk. My contact info is listed here. Please reach out with any questions. Have a look at our website for more information. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your conference.